Jessica here, Yoga for Everybody, presenting a Yoga for Writers routine. Now, the poses that I put into this routine are designed for writers because typically when we spend a lot of time writing or even just studying, we tend to hunch the shoulders down and compress the chest, which then, of course, inhibits breathing, makes it harder to breathe. So a lot of the poses will help just to bring the shoulders back, open the chest, and helps bring that body back into proper alignment. I've also included a lot of poses that will help increase abdominal strength, core strength. Of course, really, when you think about it, there isn't any pose that does not include the core muscles. So as long as we are contracting the core muscles in every pose that we practice, we will be gaining strength there. Okay, so now with that said, I have us started seated. So before we get started in the actual practice of yoga, we want to maintain, or I should say establish, proper alignment. So as you see, I'm seated on the floor, but if this is not comfortable, we could sit against a wall for a little extra support, or we could elevate the level of the floor with a blanket or a pillow, or we could sit in a chair as well. Okay, either way, we want to first check in with the bottom of the glute. So we could also actually pull out the glute from under us so we can kind of sit flat in the bottom of the sitting bone. Okay, and then we can actively push down into the earth with the bottom of the glute. Actually, let me turn sideways and see a little better. So I just took the glute and moved it back. Okay, remove the muscle and the fat out of the way so we're more flat to the earth, or in this case, pillow. Then we want to take a look at the spine. So is the spine rounded in or out, or is it flat? You could even place a hand on the back just to see, because sometimes we're rounding the spine and we don't even realize it. Okay, so placing a hand there might help. Now, of course, we can imagine that there is a string attached from the navel to the spine. So we can imagine drawing, pulling that string, well, kind of towards each other. So connecting the navel to the spine will help to activate all those internal organs and muscles. Okay, all the muscles that compose the core. And then, of course, we want the shoulders to be down and away from the ears. We could also, kind of contract the shoulder blades a little behind us just to further open that chest. And keep the hands in the lap. We could form a mudra with the hands. My favorite mudra is to connect the first finger and the thumb. It just represents the union of the body, the mind, and the spirit, forming the whole person. That's my favorite mudra, but if you have another one, there's lots of different mudras. Of course, if you don't, you can just place the hands on the lap. And then finally, the crown of the head reaches towards the sky. So if we imagine a string from the bottom of the glute all the way up the spine and through the crown of the head, pulling up to the sky, and actually also pulling down into the earth with the bottom of the glute. Okay, so it should feel as though we're pulling the body to two opposite directions, being held together by the strength of the core. Okay, so once we feel we're in proper alignment, we can then establish our deep belly breathing pattern, the Ujjayi breath. If we're new to yoga, I can do a brief summary of it. Of course, I go into further detail on the Ujjayi breath on my YouTube channel. I have a whole separate video made just for the Ujjayi breath. So go ahead and check that out if you have more questions. But essentially, we want to originate each inhale from the bottom of the belly. So Feel that belly as it fills with air with the inhale. And then we'll move the air up into the chest, and then exhale the belly, and exhale the chest. Okay, so we're inhaling the belly, inhaling the chest, exhaling the belly, and exhaling the chest. Okay, now one other thing we want to be sure of when we're breathing and maintaining this proper alignment is whether or not there's any tension being held in any place of the body. Really, we want to be aware of those tense spaces, but specifically in the face. Okay, what we can do is we can put a little smile on the lips, like I always say, a Mona Lisa smile. Even just a little bit of a smile will help release any tension in the face. And it'll also help open the airway so we can breathe easier. So we want the teeth to be separated, so the jaw is loose, the lips are closed, okay, to retain heat within the body. We're just breathing through the nose. Okay, but with that said, if you ever feel overheated in your practice, please feel free to exhale through the mouth. There's no law against exhaling through the mouth. It's just, we want those muscles to stay nice and warm, so we want to keep the warmth in the body for our practice, just because it's safer. So then we can also do is we can draw the tongue to the back of the throat. Some people will even put the tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth to help create sound, like a sound for the breath, so you can actually hear that breath. But it probably depends on your individual bone structure and length of the tongue. So you might want to experiment with that just so that you find that you can hear the sounds of the breath as well as feel them. Okay. So then after we've established that deep belly breathing pattern, we can start to add some movement to our practice. So when we're ready for that, we can inhale and bring the chest and the chin up to the sky, rounding the pelvis back. Okay, this is seated cow. And then on the exhale, we'll reverse that motion. So we'll bring the chin down and round the pelvis and the hips forward. Okay, so inhale, we're pushing the hips back. Exhale, we're squeezing forward. Okay, and then the hands are just gently resting on the thigh. They help a little bit to accentuate the opening of the chest as we inhale, and they help a little bit to accentuate the opening of the shoulder blades as we exhale. Okay. So 5 to 7 breaths here, and then when we're ready to move on, we can bring it back to a neutral seated position and practice some neck stretches. So again, anyone who spends any time writing or studying definitely needs to release tension in the neck. So let's inhale with the body stationary, and then exhale. Just tilt the head towards one shoulder. I'm tilting to my right, so if you're going to mirror me, you can tilt to your left. Of course, as you practice on your own, without the video, you just start with whatever side feels best for you. And you might notice, well, it's kind of hard to see, but I've planted my hand palm facing down, so I'm reaching the hand towards the floor to accentuate the stretch a little more along the neck and the shoulder. But if that doesn't feel good, you can just keep the hand rested in the lap. And after 5 to 7 breaths here, we can switch sides. So let's first inhale, slowly straighten out the neck, and then exhale, tilt to the other side. So we're just tilting the chin, or the ear, towards the shoulder. And then we have that option of pressing the palm of the hand down. 5 to 7 deep breaths here, and then when we're ready to move out of the pose, we do so. Exhale the breath, coming back stationary, and then we can inhale and turn the head to my right, and then as we exhale, lower that chin towards the shoulder. Okay, so this stretch is a little more of the back of the neck, as I'm sure you can tell. And we do have that option of dropping the hand again. 5 to 7 breaths, and when we're ready to come out of this pose, first inhale, bring the chin up, and then exhale, forward. Okay, then we'll switch sides, so we'll inhale, turn to the opposite side of the room, and then exhale, drop the chin to the shoulder. Five to 7 breaths here, and then we can inhale, bring the chin up, and exhale forward. Okay, now from here, let's go ahead and open the chest a little more. I call this a seated heart opener. So you'll probably want to lose the pillow or blanket if you were using one. We'll come to this seated position again. We could take the glute and move it out of the way just so we know that we're flat to the earth, flat on the sitting bones. Feet are hip width apart. Hands are going to be placed behind the body. And then we're just going to bend the elbows a little. Not fanning out with the elbows though. We want the elbows to be in line with the shoulders. And then we're going to be looking up to the corner of the ceiling. Okay, so check in with the spine as well. We want that spine to be straight. So you might want to place a hand there just to make sure you're not rounding the spine, but that it's nice and straight. Of course, always envisioning or imagining the navel being drawn towards the spine. That'll help keep that spine straight. And after 5 to 7 breaths here, we can slowly come up and swing the feet around. Do a nice little counter stretch. The child's pose, seated on the heels. Knees should be shoulder width apart, knees hip width apart, arms, hands, shoulder width apart. But if we want to elevate the level of the floor, we can use block for the forehead. We could put a pillow under the glute as well. Just to kind of elevate the level of the floor, make it a little more of a therapeutic option for this pose. We could also stack the hands. Or we could drop the hands by the feet. So whatever version feels best, we can hold that for 5 to 7 breaths, and then we'll start to warm up the upper body a little more with a yoga push-up. So now for the yoga push-ups, we want to start inhaling and coming up onto this hands and knee position. As we hold the breath, we're going to just kind of tilt the pelvis down a little bit, moving the shoulders so they're right above the wrists. And then we can exhale down. Right before we hit the mat, we'll inhale back up and then exhale back down. Okay, so let me talk you through that again. We're inhaling up to hands and knees, tilting forward as we hold the breath, exhaling down, elbows in, inhaling up, and exhaling down. Okay, so now that's the yoga push-up. If we want to incorporate a little back bend, let me show you what that looks like. So this is a half series of a sun salutation. We're inhaling up, exhaling down. This time we'll come all the way to the mat, so then we can inhale to this cobra pose for a little back bend. Okay, and then we'll exhale and we'll push all the way up and down. Okay, so let me talk you through that again. Inhaling up, exhaling down, inhaling back bend, exhaling all the way to child's. Okay, so now what I do personally in my practice is I like to alternate between the two. So one time through I'll just do a push-up, and the next time through I'll add in the back bend cobra pose. So go ahead and just go through that, play with it, see what feels best for you. Then we can actually before we move on, I want to also show you the spinal balance. So, let's come back to child's pose on the exhale. And on your next inhale, come up to this hands and knees position for spinal balance. So now for the spinal balance, we want to first check in with our alignment. I should have covered this before I went into the push-up, but it really doesn't matter too much other than the fact that we really want to make sure that the knees are below the hips and the wrists below the shoulders. Okay, just because when we stack the joints like this, it's safer. Okay, we'll avoid injury. So, and we can also spread the fingers nice and wide. We can press each finger individually into the mat. Take a little pressure off the wrists. But if you're like me and you have a long history of loose wrists, partially from riding, you might want to use a loose fist. So you make a loose fist with the hands, and then you can just press the knuckles into the mat, so that'll take pressure off the wrist. Or if that's still not comfortable, we could practice it from a prone position. But let me show you from hands and knees first. So, inhaling, we're going to bring, let me scooch forward a little bit. We're going to bring one arm and the opposite leg out and then up, just until it's parallel to the floor. Okay, then we'll exhale and bring it back to tabletop. It's hands and knees I usually refer to as tabletop. Okay, so then in the next inhale we'll reverse, so we'll switch. We'll bring the opposite arm and leg up just to parallel, and then we'll exhale down. So inhaling, coming out and up, and exhaling down. So we can go ahead and alternate like this for as long as we want to. And then when we're ready, we can try holding the spinal balance. So when we're holding the spinal balance, this is when we really want to check in with our alignment. So take a look at the wrists, make sure they're below the shoulders. Take a look at the knee, make sure it's right below the hip. Take a look at the back leg, make sure it's not too high. So if you'll notice, when I lift the leg too high, it puts too much of a curve in the lumbar spine, so we can actually do a lot of damage there. So you want that leg to be nice and straight. Same thing with the arm, nice and parallel to the floor. Okay. And this elbow is slightly bent. Okay. So we don't ever want to lock the elbow. We want it to have a little tiny bend in it. And when you're ready to switch sides, go do so nice and slowly on the exhale. And then we can switch sides. So same thing, checking in with the alignment, making sure we're parallel. We could also take notice of our base. So the base of this pose is going to be the right hand or the fist, okay, and then the left leg. So the top of the foot and the shins and the knee. So what we want to try and do is, once we've identified our base, we can then actively push the base into the mat, hopefully evenly. So you want to evenly distribute your weight in the base of the pose, just to get more stability. And when you're ready to come out of it, do so on the exhale of the breath. We can come back down to child's pose for a little break here, maybe just 1 or 2 breaths. We could shake out the wrists a little bit. Oh, and like I said earlier, if you're like me and you have wrist issues, you might prefer to practice the spinal balance from this prone position. Okay, so when we're doing it this way, we'll have the arms and legs straight out, and then we'll inhale, bring one arm and the opposite leg up, and exhale down. Okay, now again, we don't want to lift that leg too high, because notice when I do, it crushes the lumbar spine. It's too much of a curve in the spine. So we just want it to lift up just a couple inches before we exhale down. So we're inhaling up exhaling down. Inhaling up and exhaling down. And then whenever we're ready to hold it, we can go ahead and hold it and suspend in this position for, I would say 3 to 5 breaths. It's more challenging than it looks. So hold it for as long as you feel comfortable with. Exhale when you're ready to come out. And then go ahead and switch sides and hold it for, ideally you'll want to hold it for the same amount of time on both sides, just so you're evenly balancing out the strength of your body on both sides. And when you're ready to come out of the pose, do so on the exhale of the breath, and we can transition to our work portion. So we'll transition into our sun salutation first, just by coming into this cobra pose. So for cobra pose, you'll notice my feet are hip width apart. The hands are by my chest, elbows are in towards the rib cage, shoulders are down, away from the ears. You could even contract the shoulder blades to further open the chest. And I'm just using the strength of my lower back to lift my upper body up off the mat. And I'm looking down in the front of the mat on the floor. We can hold this for 3 to 5 breaths. And then if you want to, we can try upward facing dog. If it's not comfortable, we could just stay in cobra. But let me go ahead and show you what upward facing dog looks like. We want to first inhale and then exhale. We can push through the hands. And let me move forward a little bit. We're transferring our weight into just the tops of the feet. Okay, so we should not have the knees on the mat. Again, do you see how that big angle in a big obtuse, large angle in the lower back? Okay, that'll put too much pressure on the spine. So we want to engage the lower body by contracting the muscles of the thighs. And so the knees will be slightly elevated off the floor. Okay. A little bend in the elbow. Again, chest is open. We're looking to the corner of the ceiling. 3 to 5 breaths here. Now we can inhale and curl the toes under. And exhale to downward facing dog. And for downward facing dog, if you didn't notice, I shortened the distance between my hands and feet. Of course, the closer you are, more of a stretch it's going to be. So you can experiment with that, see what feels best. The heels are going to be elevated just slightly off the mat. Feet hip width apart, arms shoulder width apart, a little bend in the elbow. We can also shake the head, yes and no. Just make sure there's not any lingering tension there in the neck. This is one of the only inversion poses that I teach. It's the only one that's safe for beginner. One of the only ones that's safe for beginners. So you can go ahead and hold this for a little longer. Of course, we don't want to lose feelings. If you feel tingly in the feet, or the hands, then you'll know it's time to move on. I would say 5 to 7 breaths here. Now when you're ready to move on, we can inhale and turn the head to look up towards the hands. Then we can exhale and bring the feet to the front of the mat, hip width apart, for forward fold. Now for forward fold, we can either reach towards the floor, we can have a little bend or a deep bend in the knees. We could also cradle the head with the forearms by grabbing opposite elbows. We can also use a block or a chair to rest the hands on, just to elevate the level of the floor, whatever feels best for you. You can hold this for 3 to 5 breaths, and then when you're ready to come up out of the pose, we're going to start coming out of it on the exhale of the breath. So on the exhale, we'll start rolling up to standing, hinging at the hips, swooping the arms out and around. And then as we inhale, we'll bring the arms up over the head. And exhale back to prayer. Okay, so now this is when we're really going to start our sun salutation. That was kind of a pre-sun salutation. So now, we're going to be starting from the front of the mat, hands in the prayer position. Okay, and then we can inhale, bring the arms up over the head, and then we can exhale and bring it to a back bend / chest opener. So I just have my arms shoulder width apart. If that's not comfortable, you could also just bring the arms back behind. Bring them to the small of the back. You can also bring them, interlace the fingers. Okay. If this doesn't feel good to combine the chest opener with the back bend, you can just keep the back straight and just do a chest opener. Okay. Either way, we're inhaling, and then we're going to exhale to forward fold. So swan diving. Let me show you that swan dive. Swan diving is hinging at the hips and swooping the arms out and around. Just to safely make our way down to forward fold. Full breath here. Next inhale, we'll straighten the back, so making that upper body parallel to the floor, just resting the fingers on the shins. This is monkey. And then exhaling to downward facing dog. And actually there's a couple different options for that little transition. We could either walk the feet back or we can hop. Okay, and obviously the hopping is going to engage more abdominal muscles. So you might want to choose to try the hopping. Full breath here in downward facing dog. Next inhale, we'll come to that plank position. So if it's not comfortable to have the knees up like this, we could also drop them. Okay. Exhaling, we'll come down right before we hit the mat. Well, no, we'll come all the way down to the mat. And then we can inhale either to cobra pose or upward facing dog, again, depending on whether or not the legs are strong enough to lift up off the mat. Okay? On the same inhale, you know what, sometimes I hold this longer. If you want to hold this pose a little longer, go ahead and take a couple breaths here. And when you're ready to transition out of it, we'll first inhale, curl the toes, and then exhale to down dog for a full breath. Now on the next inhale, on the next exhale, we're going to lift the right leg up. I always start with my right leg. You can definitely start with your left if that feels better. So I'm lifting it straight up for three-legged dog, okay? But obviously it's not completely straight, but you want to utilize as many muscles as possible, all the way from the hips to the glute, to the thighs, to the shins, to the calves. Even the toes are helping to reach that leg up for three-legged dog. The bottom leg is slightly bent, the elbows are slightly bent, the head and neck is nice and loose. Okay, and then if we want to add a little twist, what we can do is we can open up the hips to the side wall and bend that top leg. Okay, so this really, I don't have a technical name for it, I just call it three-legged dog with a twist. Sometimes they call it the fire hydrant. As you can imagine, this is what a dog looks like, maybe in a fire hydrant. Certainly not its Sanskrit name. And we can hold this for as long as we want. When we're ready to come out of it, first we want to inhale and square the hips down. And then we can exhale and bring the right leg forward. We're going to plant that right foot in the front of the mat. Come up onto the fingertips on the inhale of the breath, and then on the exhale of the breath, we'll come into this Warrior 3 position. So for Warrior 3, we're suspending When we're balancing on one leg, we can either reach the arms straight forward, shoulder width apart, or, oh, can't even see. We could also use a chair here to help with the arms. So if we're not feeling quite as balanced today, we could just rest the hands on the chair or even the wall. So we could just use the wall for help in Warrior 3, because it is a very challenging pose, but for time purposes, let's go ahead and move on. So from Warrior 3, we could actually only hold it for one inhale, and then on the next exhale, we could fold forward to standing split pose. So for standing split pose, it's very similar to three-legged dog, only we move our hands by our feet. So we want the hands to be directly below the shoulders, a little bend in this bottom leg, and then of course we're going to try reaching up to the sky. And exhaling, we'll come back slowly to downward facing dog for a full breath. When I say a full breath, that just means an inhale and an exhale. Next inhale, we'll turn the head so we can see the hands. Exhale, walk to the front of the mat for forward fold. Full breath here. Next inhale, come up to that monkey pose, nice flat back. Exhaling down, then we'll start to hinge and swoop back up as we exhale. And then as the arms come up, we'll start to inhale. And exhale back to prayer. Okay, so that was our sun salutation on the right side. So now we have to do it on the left side. And of course, you can certainly practice sun salutation more than 2 times. You just want to make sure that if you do it, you want to do it evenly. So 2 times or 4 times or 6 times, just so you're doing each side the same amount of times. Okay. So let's see. Inhaling, we're bringing the arms up over the head. Exhaling, we're taking that back bend or just a chest opener. And exhaling, we'll swoop and swan dive to forward fold for a full breath. Inhale, come up to monkey. And exhale to down dog. Full breath. Next inhale, come to that plank position, top of a push-up. Of course, we could always drop the knees too. Exhaling down and inhaling either to cobra or up dog. Curling the toes and exhaling to down dog. Full breath, of course. Always remembering that you can hold these poses longer. You don't have to make it quite as quick. But the more fast-paced your practice is, obviously, the higher your heart rate will get and the more calories you're burning. So, with that said, let's go ahead and exhale. Bring the left foot up this time. So, three-legged dog, the hips are still squared down. Or, if we want to, we could turn the hips to the side wall and bend that knee. Oh, and I forgot to mention, for this version of the pose, we also want to slightly turn the head towards the armpit, so it'll look like you're smiling your armpit. I know it's glamorous, but that's what yoga is. It's a practice. It's not necessarily glamorous. And as we exhale, let's go ahead and turn the hips, square them down, and then we can bring the right foot, or no, the left foot forward, sorry. Inhaling, we'll come up onto the fingertips, and then exhaling to Warrior 3. Let me scooch back. Again, you might want to practice against a wall just because that transition is so challenging. Certainly wouldn't want to fall. So having a chair nearby or a wall is definitely recommended. And then exhaling to that split pose. So So bringing the hands down, relaxing that head and neck. And on your exhale, we can come bring it back to downward facing dog. So holding that split pose for just as long as you want to. You could just hold it just for the exhale if you want to before you move back to down dog for a full breath. Next inhale, we'll turn the head so we can see the hands, and then we'll exhale to forward fold for a full breath. Next inhale, come up to that monkey pose, so it's a nice flat back. Exhaling, forward fold. As we exhale, we'll start to swan dive back up. Inhaling as the arms come over the head. And exhaling back to prayer. Okay, so that's our sun salutation. For time purposes, I'm only going to go through it twice. But again, as you practice on your own, you might want to expand on that. And then next I have the eagle pose for us. But of course, if this doesn't feel good for us today, there's lots of other balancing poses that we can try. Again, I've posted all my poses in individual demonstration videos on my YouTube channel. I've linked them all to my website, on my blog. So if you want to switch up your practice, try different balancing poses, please definitely do that. But for the purpose of this routine, I've chosen the eagle pose but mostly because of the stretch between the shoulder blades. So let me show you the arms first. We're going to start by making an X with the arms. I have my right arm on top. Now we're going to make a V, and then we're going to draw the backs of the hands together. Okay, so what this does is it stretches in between the shoulder blades and the top of the shoulder as well. And then what we can do is, since the right arm is on top, we're going to want the left leg on top. So we're going to balance on the right leg and kind of just cross the left over it, kind of like sitting in a chair cross-legged. And then, if that feels good, we can try hooking the ankle across the right leg. Okay, but obviously, if the hips are not open, it'll put too much pressure on the knees to hook the ankles. So, if that does not feel good, we can just leave the foot out here. 3 to 5 breaths. When you're ready to come out of the pose, do so slowly in the exhale of the breath. And shake it out. Then we'll try it on the other side. So this time we'll want our left arm on top for our X. Bring it up to a V. Bring the bottoms of the hands together. And we'll transfer the weight to the left foot. I forgot to mention earlier, you also want to spread those toes out nice and widely to expand your base. Little bend in the left leg. First, just crossing the thighs, and then, if it feels good, we can try hooking the ankle. I strained my ankle about a year ago, and I still have issues with it. So, as we practice these poses, notice the differences in how the body feels from one side to the other. Of course, recognizing differences in the body will help prevent injury. And shaking it out. Always coming out of these poses slowly on the exhale of the breath. So now we're ready for our cool down. So for our cool down, I have us started knees to chest. So slowly come down to the mat. Make sure there's room behind you. And the safest way to roll down to supine position is to grab a hold of the thigh, push the thigh into the hands, and then use that to help just slowly guide yourself down to hands and knees. Okay, so the knees are hip width apart and the hands are on the thighs. We could also use a blanket here or a pillow. Okay, if that feels better. Ooh, and we could gently rock from side to side. Now, for these cool down poses, we really want to get the heart rate back to a normal rate. And then we want the breathing to return back to a normal breathing pattern as well. So, that's why I have us holding these poses for 7 to 9 breaths, as opposed to the warm-up was just 5 to 7. Okay. We got our heart rate up pretty high today, so we want to make sure it cools down before we settle into our final relaxation. So, when we're ready to move out of this pose, actually, let me throw in one more pose, although there's different options with this bridge pose that'll make it more restorative. Let me just first show you the full extent of the pose. We'll start with the feet hip width apart, and then we'll bring the hands under the glute so then we can contract the shoulder blades and bring the arms to the mat. So what I did was I took the neck, pressure off the neck, and transferred it onto the forearms. Okay, so then I'll take an inhale and then exhale. I'll lift the glute up until the hips are in alignment with the knees. Okay, and I can keep the forearms pressing down into the mat, or if I'm feeling more flexible, we could interlace the fingers so I can contract the shoulder blades together even more. One thing to notice here especially is the knees. A lot of times the knees want to bow out, so we want to contract the inner thighs to keep those knees in alignment with the hips. Okay? And if we want a more restorative option, because this definitely will get the heart rate up after a couple of rests, so if we want a more of a relaxing option for this pose, we can try placing a block under the small of the back. So then we can just kind of hang out here. And when we're ready to come out of the pose, we do so slowly on the exhale of the breath, one vertebrae at a time, first lowering the upper back, middle back, lower back, and then we can bring it back to knees to chest for a couple breaths. A nice counter stretch. And then whenever we're ready, let's go ahead and throw in a twist. We didn't do a whole lot of twisting, so we definitely want to add a twist in at the end. This is a supine spinal twist I've chosen for this routine. There's lots of different versions of the supine spinal twist, so again, please check out my other videos. I've gone into more details on all the modification options for all these poses. For time purposes, I'll just show you the basic general supine spinal twist. And actually, the safest way to get into it is to first bring the arms out to a T. Okay, we'll drop the feet hip width apart. Then we'll lift the hips up off the mat, shift them over to the left, drop them, lift the knees, and then drop the knees to the right. Okay, lifting and shifting the hips back to the left, made sure that the hips stay in alignment with the shoulders. Okay, it's very important. And then we also will have to lift and shift the shoulder blades. Okay, again, to ensure proper alignment. Then we can place a blanket or a pillow in between the knees to keep the knees in alignment with the hips. Then finally, we can turn the head to look away from the knees. 7 to 9 breaths here. Still breathing from the belly. When we're ready to come out of the pose, do so slowly on the exhale of the breath, bringing the knees in and dropping the feet. And then now we'll want to lift the hips up and shift them over to the right. Lift the knees up and drop them to the left. Lift and shift the shoulder blades so the chest is open to the sky. You can bring that blanket or pillow. And then finally we can turn the head to look away from the knees. 7 to 9 breaths here. Then when we're ready to transition out of this pose, we can slowly on the exhale bring the knees up. Drop the feet. Actually, we're going to turn the bottoms of the feet together for reclining queen pose, which really is a different version of the butterfly pose. So the bottoms of the feet are touching, the knees bow out. We could, if we wanted to, support the knees with a block or a blanket or a pillow to just take a little pressure off the inner thighs. Now the lower back is going to have an arch in this pose. So if that's not comfortable, if that puts too much pressure on the lumbar spine, we can elevate the feet so then we can flatten the back, flat to the earth. Okay. And then the arms will come out to a T, and then we'll bend the elbows in a 90-degree angle just to help further open up the chest. Shoulders are down, away from the ears. Nice deep breaths here. And actually we could stay in this pose for our final relaxation. Or we could transition to the corpse pose. So just lying flat to the earth. Allowing the fingertips to curl in towards the palm of the hand, allowing the feet to just gently flop to the side. Or we can come up to a seated position for our final relaxation, our meditation. Safest way to come up to seated is to first bring the hands up over the head, knees to the chest, roll over, and slowly push yourself up to seated. Okay, and we could sit just how we started. We could sit against a wall. We could sit on a blanket or a pillow. We could even just be seated in a chair. Okay. We could also form a mudra. And then for our final relaxation, you might want to switch it up. You might want to do something a little different every day. But if you're anything like me, I like to choose the same mantra, the same words or phrases that are meaningful to me. Then I just repeat them. So when I find my mind wandering, acknowledge that without judgment. Okay, it's very important. Just without judgment, acknowledge the thoughts that may pop into the mind. Usually in the beginning of a yoga practice and at the end is when we have the most kind of brain fog. The mind wants to resist the training of the meditation. So acknowledge that, it's perfectly normal. And then return the awareness back to, first of all, the rhythm and the quality of the breath as it flows in and out of the body. Notice also the sounds of the breath. Okay, so really try and get that sound just to help keep your awareness on that breath. Okay, and then we can also return our awareness to that specific word or phrase that is meaningful to us. So, especially if we're feeling any pain, we might want to focus on healing or health, love, peace. Anything really that is significant to you in your body and mind's needs. This is what we want to focus our thoughts on. So the idea is focus your thoughts and then you can control what happens to you in your life. Okay, so that's a brief overview. Again, I had to go through it kind of quickly for time purposes, so if there are any questions, comments, concerns that you have, please let me know. You can also look at my website. You can contact me through my website, actually. So please be sure to check out that, especially for more modification options. So thanks again for watching. Namaste.